To cut a long backstory short, my wife 30, and I 31, have been living separated for about 1.5 years, married for 7 years. 1 year of the separation was in the same house because of our 3 children currently living with me, but the new agreement will be 3 and 4 days in alternation with each of us parents. Before the separation, there was a marriage crisis, also some bad bedroom problems, which we tried to solve with professional help, but at that time, she probably already did not want any more. Before the new arrangement, we saw each other regularly and also talked. Now she has recently remembered that as a child she had a very traumatic experience, which was probably triggered during the marriage crisis. There are also parallels to what happened. She will discuss this and other unprocessed with a psychologist and has already made an appointment. Since she moved out, she has already had several affairs because for her the marriage only exists on paper now. She is also more or less looking for something new, but is also still unclear about what she wants at all. Before the childhood trauma came out, I was actually ready to inform myself about divorce law steps because I realized there was no hope. But since I know about that trauma, I am not really sure anymore. Somehow I have the hope that through the psychological talks that are pending, she can process all the problems and pain from the time before me, and also what happened in the crisis, and then possibly imagine coming back. I know the chance of this is extremely small, and it would probably be healthier for me to just make the cut, but somehow I can no longer let her go so easily because of the new knowledge. Her understandable reason why she doesn't want to try it again is the lack of trust and the fear that it will fall back into the old pattern after a certain time. I'm pretty messed up emotionally, and also scared of the decisions I'll probably have to make and accept. I think I need someone with a neutral point of view. If anyone has any tips on how I can change my mindset to stop seeing hope, I would also appreciate it. Update. Some time has passed since my last post. Small recap. My wife moved out a while ago, and in the meanwhile met and had sexual contact with other men. Due to new findings, childhood trauma, for which she now wants to go to therapy, not sure if she is actually doing it. I was not sure whether I should have hope or not. I have since tried to keep the contact to a minimum and only discuss things that concern the children. This has worked more or less well, although we still had a lot of contact, especially because of the upcoming birthday of one of our children. I felt better, but of course, still had many bad thoughts about what she does or doesn't do in regard to men. During the last conversation, she assured me that she would not meet any other men anymore, because she didn't want to, and she had to find out what she really wanted first. I was sure that she did it anyway, but had no proof. Then was the birthday of my child. We were together with the family. She was of course also present. For me, it was super weird. I felt really uncomfortable as she puts on happy life and spoke like a friend to me while everything was broken. I also felt that something was weird. The kid's birthday party was planned for the day after. I called her in the morning and told her I thought it would be better if she didn't come. The kids were with me that day anyway. I explained why, but she insisted on coming. The party was going well, the kids had fun, and all. But I couldn't resist, and then it happened. I couldn't stand it. I checked her cell phone and read the 1 or 2 men, and that they were also coming to her house and spending the night. I must say that I mentioned several times that I didn't want my children to sleep in the same bed where she was doing things with men. She agreed with me and said she didn't want that either. In an angry reaction, I told her to leave the party. When she asked why, I told her that I had read her messages. After that, it escalated a bit. She was angry because I had disregarded her privacy. I did not care. I told her how could she be so dishonest, and that she should leave. I told her that I never wanted to see her again. She tried to justify herself with sentences like, I tried not to see him again, but I'm only human and weak. It got a bit ugly in the conversation, but then she left. Later, I got a message where she admitted to sleeping with men, and that she would continue to meet with the one. She said she didn't give a crap about me now, and she didn't care about my feelings anymore. She talked about how great the sex was, and that she has orgasms. She literally wrote that. She also wanted to report me for violating her privacy. She thinks I hacked her phone or installed some software, but I still had a fingerprint registered, and said I provoked her. For me, this was the final straw. I now have an appointment with the lawyer, and will file for divorce. But what hurts me so much is the sentence about sex. I realize that she wrote that out of anger to hurt me, but it still knocked my confidence. Our sex life was always okay, but nothing special. I was her first, and she was always rather reserved to discover her own sexual passion, and had also mentioned earlier that she liked her experience. I am also afraid that now it will come to an ugly divorce, and it will be more of a rose war. Also regarding the children, and the fact that they will eventually see their mother with another man. I had a conversation yesterday with my daughter, close to 10 years old, who doesn't want to be with her mother because she feels uncomfortable there. She was sad because she wants her mother to move back in. I tried to explain to her why that was not going to happen. I told her that it had nothing to do with the children, that mom still loved her, and that I loved her more than anything, and would always be there for her. I am not sure how much I can tell my daughter. Something like she is dating other men, I think is rather wrong to say. I am also really scared about the future, and how I will feel. Update. I wanted to limit personal contact to an absolute minimum, and only what is necessary, because of the children, and started to follow through. A couple of weeks ago, I had planned a ski weekend with my kids. Just before we left, one of my kids started making a scene, because they didn't want to clean up the room. This led to discussions, and to the point that child said they didn't want to go with me, and wanted to stay with their mother. So I told the child to call the mother, and clarify that. Of course, it wasn't an option, because of work, and who knows what else. I was very emotionally charged at this time, because I was really looking forward to the weekend, and so were the kids, and because I still blame my STBX for the shattered situation, and how my kids feel. I had talked several times with said child about how it felt, and of course, they're doing really bad with it, quite the opposite of what the mother thinks, that must have no effect on the children. Anyway, I then took the phone, because I wanted a confirmation of what is now the matter. It got a little out of hand again, because I expressed to my STBX what I thought about it, and why it happened. She hung up on me, and I sent her a one-line email with the words, "You can hang up, but that doesn't change the truth." The whole thing was like before an emotional act on my side. Meanwhile, I managed better when I let the situation cool down first, and then react, see later. This in turn triggered a very long answer from her, also definitely emotionally written, in which she described her truths. I will not elaborate here, but it was about what I did wrong, and how I treated her wrong. Also, she said that she didn't regret the affairs, one of them led to an abortion, how can you not regret that? So again, completely trying to shift the blame and responsibility onto me. Also, and this is the critical point, she wrote, "The truth is that I don't want you in my life anymore, and I am ready to divorce you." I took the opportunity to respond to her bullshit, and present things objectively, to show her what kind of bubble she's living in. And I took the opportunity to point out to her, that she was going to get a letter from my lawyer soon anyway about the divorce. I explained to her in detail, and objectively why I have no more hope for us. And then came the answer, "I did not intend to divorce, but apparently you have planned and organized everything." I did not care, and I did not go further into it by replying. The fact is that she is screaming for a divorce with all her behavior, and the things she has said. Maybe not in the illusory world that she has built up. Because according to her ideas, we would probably stay married, and be a family with everything that belongs to it. But she may continue to see other men. This has shown me that she is absolutely not aware of what she has done, and has not reckoned with the consequences. Presumably, she must have been shocked by my information. Since then, our contact has been almost exclusively related to the children. I have set up an app with a shared calendar, through which we can communicate about child-related things. On Friday 2 weeks ago, came the expected reaction. She wrote a text message that she had received the letter, and would read everything very carefully. I could literally feel her anger. She then made a few comments about the content, which showed me that she was very emotionally charged. She probably thought at the beginning that I was just making an empty threat, and now she has seen that this is not the case. As mentioned before, I also think that she is slowly realizing that her house of cards and wishful thinking is collapsing, and she has to bear the consequences herself. 3 days after she received the letter, she wrote me the following message. I will translate it roughly. Dear OP, I have been longing to apologize to you for everything that happened, that you had to suffer because of me, and that I hurt you, and that everything is destroyed. But I also want to thank you for the fact that I was able to grow up with you. I hope you know that I will always be there for you when you need me, and I mean it. Since we didn't make it as a couple, I would be very happy if we could be good parents for the children, function harmoniously, and give them security. I hope I have expressed myself clearly. Thank you. What should I even think about this? What is she apologizing for? For everything. Of course, that makes it easy to not have to reflect properly. So she doesn't have to deal with what she did, and still hopes for forgiveness from me. She is always there for me. That was part of our vows, and obviously she didn't stick to it. Thanking me for growing up. Again, obviously she hasn't learned the most important lesson, how to handle crisis. And by that I mean the initial marriage crisis that probably triggered this, and after which she ended up in a continuous downward spiral. She clearly wants absolution from me. I don't think she is waiting for an answer from me. I think it's more that she has now said the things she wanted to say, and thinks she can now feel better about it. She also said at one point that she would now start to try to see things more positively. Basically what I had said to her for years, and now she's doing it after she already destroyed her family. I now have 1 week to decide, so there's no emotional reaction. Whether I should give her the satisfaction, or take it away from her with an answer. Namely to hold the truth before her eyes, and the things I above. I know, NC and all. But in this case, I don't think she is looking for contact, but rather absolution. And my answer would be then only to smash her desire, and possibly now inner peace, which I assume by the vague wording of this SMS and action itself. Oh, and the report of the abuse of privacy. She has at some point claimed that she was at the police, but she would not report me. Of course not, probably she was told that she has nothing in hand, and would only make a fool of herself. The divorce itself is initiated, but it takes between 6 to 12 months, until the whole thing is through. What do you think, should I answer, or rather not? It's not about wanting to save the marriage somehow. I don't see any hope for it. Also, I would not want it at all, with my wife as she was before maybe, but she has changed so much for the worse, and is now no longer the same. Update. A week ago I had written, and now I need advice again. I am struggling hard, and am just hurt and angry. Against my deepest desire for revenge, I have not responded to the message of Maestax last week, because of the advice here. But the whole thing just won't let me go. I am sure she is living her life right now, and is happy. Finally out of the marriage, I filed for divorce, which she probably wanted for a long time. She probably even has a new relationship already. I think that because of the following, I got my oldest child a cell phone with which the kids can call me when I'm out of the house, and whatnot. It is also the number of the mother, because otherwise, the kids use the home phone, which is much too expensive. Now it happened that my eldest has tried to call the mother who is not picked up. Maestax then later sent a text message to the kid's phone asking who the number belongs to. At 10 p.m., the cell phone was called with a suppressed number, 3 minutes later from the mother. So since I don't think my ex knows how to suppress the number, she was not alone. In addition, I contacted her Saturday through the co-parenting app, because she had forgotten to do something kids-related. The answer was that she could only do it on Sunday. So she was definitely away for the weekend, probably with her new guy. What I want to get at, I really want and see, but it seems that there is always some information coming to me that gives reason for speculation. And I absolutely cannot handle the fact that my ex is already happily in a relationship. She has no right to it in my opinion, while the kids and I suffer, just simply because she apologized, which probably wasn't even meant seriously, and then just started building a new life in her way. This is killing me, and I don't know how to deal with it. I don't want this to constantly haunt me and make me feel bad, because I'm triggered everywhere. I'm probably additionally so angry, because I know that as a divorced male with 3 kids, it's virtually impossible to meet a woman. I know because I tried, even though I don't think I ain't ready. I also tried without stating that I have kids, which worked better, but sure that won't lead to a real relationship. Of course she has no problem finding someone as a good-looking and naive young mother. You are certainly an easy target, or fetish of some. I doubt that most of them want something serious, but just take advantage of it. But if you are so ignorant and naive not to see that, you are happy in the moment, right? And I do not wish that for her, even though I know that this definitely suggests a bad character trait of mine. How do you deal with it? How do I change my mindset and stop caring about her? Why do I love and hate her at the same time? OP, sorry to be blunt, but your wife is a cake eater. She wants the stability from you with the children to support her lifestyle. She is the same person who said sex was better to belittle you. This is her way of justifying to herself that she is a better person, so don't respond, and you show her you are a man of your word, and go ahead with the divorce. Don't communicate with her anymore. Only through your lawyer or a court-approved co-parenting app. The truth has already been stated. She told you she didn't regret her affairs. It seems your children need some therapy, as the reaction of your child suggests he is still struggling to come to terms. So focus all your energy on yourself and the child. They have seen their parents argue and heard things that children their age probably don't need to hear, so there may be some trauma that needs to be addressed, so reassure them through therapy. Good luck, as it's a long, hard road when children are involved. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment below with your thoughts on today's story. If there is a story you would like to share with me, please feel free to contact me. When my wife, 36, and I, 30, met, she told me she had epilepsy and would occasionally have seizures. She managed them pretty well, but sometimes it still happened. I wasn't too worried and continued dating her. We were together for 5 years before she had a seizure in my presence. It was terrifying. All I wanted to do was stop it for her, but I couldn't. I did everything I learned to do for her, and when it finally stopped and she came to, I was relieved. We were married that same year. Fast forward 11 years. She had seizures a little more often, about twice a year. Every time she had one, she told me she realized how fragile life was as she knew it. It was all dependent on her brain's health, which she couldn't control. She still worked, and I worried about her. One day, out of the blue, she tells me she wants to work more hours. I tried to tell her we didn't need more income, and I appreciated the time she spent at home with me and our pets. She wasn't convinced. She said she needed to dedicate her time to something, and she was passionate about crafts and wanted to earn more money. She already got a discount at the store, so more money meant she could buy more craft supplies. I finally gave in. I got the idea that she wasn't going to let this go, so instead of coming home at 2, she started coming home anywhere between 5 and 8. It was odd to me that even when I asked her to keep her schedule consistent and give it to me in advance, she never did. She said they'd change her hours even after printing them out. This was frustrating, and I'd spend a lot of nights alone with dinner ready, wondering if she was going to be home soon. I finally got tired of it and asked her to fully quit. She obviously said no and added that she was enjoying herself. I told her I wasn't and at least wanted to know when she'd be home each night. When her behavior continued anyway, I accepted defeat for a while, just until I noticed that her paychecks didn't increase very much at all. We had a joint bank account and her direct deposit was still happening, but it was as if she only took another 2 hours a week. This was the last straw. I installed a spying app on her phone while she slept. When she went to work the next day, I was going to know if she went anywhere else before coming home. Sure enough, she went to an address I had never seen before in some random neighborhood. When she got home an hour and a half later, I couldn't contain myself anymore and I confronted her. She laughed a soft chuckle and told me she just took her friend home from work, and afterward they watched a few episodes of a show. She apologized for not letting me know and said she wouldn't go anywhere else after work again. I was surprised she was so calm and had a reasonable explanation for going somewhere else. I asked why her paychecks didn't go up, and she was still totally calm while she said it was because I was right about us not needing that much more money. So, she upped the percentage of retirement money they took out of her pay. I was almost convinced. I apologized to her for being suspicious, but she said she understood why. We made love and it was perfect. The next night, after she came home from work on time, she had a seizure. I gave her the medicine she needed, wiped the drool off her face, moved her hair behind her ear, and got her a pillow. She was pretty groggy and typed out a text on her phone. She dropped it on the floor next to her, and I happened to be able to see it. The message she just sent said, "I love you." Had to say it before it's too late. It instantly felt like I was floating without a body. I was in shock. The person she sent it to was programmed as Christy. My mouth started to dry, and I felt like I was going to choke on my own tongue. I actually gagged. My wife looked at me, starting to realize I was acting weird. I reached down to pick up her phone, and she grabbed it before me, asking me what I was doing. I told her I just saw her messages with Christy, and needed to know what was going on behind my back. She looked like a deer in headlights. She couldn't believe she'd been so careless, and threw her phone on the floor without turning off the screen. She tried to talk, but all that came out were squeaks and stuttering. I screamed at the top of my lungs for her to tell me. She jumped out of her skin and started shaking. She said she was hanging out with a girl named Christy after work every night. She thought at first they were just really good friends, but she realized it was really difficult for her to even stand one night apart from her. She was falling in love with Christy and wanted to keep seeing her. I jumped off the couch and started pacing while I asked her more questions. Now that she met Christy, she felt like she was always meant to be with her, and I was just a placeholder in her life. I was completely shaken and didn't know what I needed to say anymore. It was like nothing mattered at all, but I was mad. It felt like the emotional equivalent of trying to catch falling sand with your hands. It was frustrating, if not impossible, and why did it matter anyway? I immediately went to pack. I couldn't stay here, even if she was willing to leave. We were renting the house, so I figured I could find a different place to rent soon enough. My wife apologized to me, but it didn't seem sincere. She actually seemed amused, even though she was trying hard not to look that way. I went to stay at my brother's house. My ex was pretty happy for the first 3 weeks. She probably had Christy over a lot, maybe even for the whole time, but then beautiful consequences started to happen. Christy was a shift supervisor at their workplace, and she wasn't supposed to be in a relationship with any coworkers. When they transferred her to another store in a different town, it was more logical for her to move closer to it. When Christy left my ex's apartment, she told her their relationship was over. Short flame, if I ever saw one. My wife cried herself to sleep every night, leaving me extremely long voicemails that I never listened to all the way. The divorce was final around the time my wife was evicted from our old place. She didn't work enough hours to pay the bills alone, and they didn't want her to work more hours. She stayed at a cheap motel for a week until she left town. She didn't tell me where she was going, just that she felt like the biggest fool in the world. She said she knew she had to go through this hard lesson of humility and accept fault for ruining our marriage. At least she learned something. I mean, I'd hoped she would never do something so stupid ever again, but what she did to me she couldn't take back. I found a place to rent and adopted a raccoon. He's awesome, and I've started seeing a nice girl, but we've only had one date. I am learning and accepting to live on my own for a while until I know for sure I'm ready to commit to someone permanently again. Wow, OP, you have been through a hellish relationship trauma. Make sure you always have emotional support people to confide in, and know for a fact that not all spouses would behave dishonorably. There are people who need a lot of self-growth, people who have moderately self-grown, and people who are rare, who have learned that people never stop growing, learning, and changing. To make foolish decisions is to be unaware or careless of what's truly important and honorable in life, the values that could bring true happiness and contentment into any relationship. Be humble, honorable, selfless, accepting of change, and communicative. Half of communication is listening, so always remember to take time to listen with interest to your spouse's words. They want you to know something, and they could be talking to anyone else in the world. You are their partner, and you influence their quality of life. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Now let's get into today's second story. My wife, 24, and I, 26, married for 5 years without any problems. The problem started with her sudden onset of insomnia. Nothing changed in our life. We still lived in the same home, and both still worked the same jobs. She would get home from work a little before me, but instead of coming home to a ready dinner made for the two of us, I came home to her on her phone laying in bed. She said she already ate and stayed on her phone doing whatever. We had a 2-year-old at this point. She would usually be playing beside her in the bed, but I started to wonder if my wife was even paying attention to her daughter any more than a babysitter. She started taking walks in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. I woke up and saw she was gone from our bed, so I checked our baby's room, then downstairs, then opened the front door to see if the car was gone. I open it and find her standing there about to come back into the house. She didn't have her keys in her hand and was still wearing her pajamas, so I believed her when she said she couldn't sleep and needed to get some air. Our neighborhood was safe, but I did ask her to try to stay in the house from now on. She didn't. It was several nights in a row that I would stir just as my wife was getting back into bed from God knows where. As I fell asleep each night, she was on her phone. I finally had enough. I asked her to let me see her phone one night, just before I fell asleep. She was stunned by my request and said she didn't need to give me her phone. I said if she was a good, loyal wife, there wouldn't be any problem. She was really upset with me now. She said I didn't trust her and she didn't have to stand for this. Before I could stop her, she locked herself in the bathroom with her phone. I thought I heard whispering, but if she did try to call, it was only for a few seconds. Then she came out and threw her phone at me, telling me I could look at it all I wanted, because she cleaned off all the evidence. I told her I wasn't the idiot she thought I was, and I knew something was going on. I said if she didn't stop all the odd behavior, I would hire a PI to follow her around. She gasped and said we couldn't afford that. It could be worth the investment, I told her. Not even 1 week later, I saw an Amazon charge on her account for 2 manly-type gifts. I think maybe, although doubtful, she bought me apology presents. I waited 2 days and found that the packages were delivered, but my wife hid them away. Before we went to bed that night, I saw charges from gas stations over the past month that we normally wouldn't drive to. She was definitely going somewhere after work, in the middle of the night and possibly during the day, when I'd assume she was working. I stayed awake in bed, waiting for her to leave like she always did. I didn't think it would be so easy to pretend to be asleep until 2:45 a.m. That's when she very slowly and quietly got out of bed. I watched her from the upstairs window as she got in her car and drove away. I went downstairs to look for any clues she might have left behind. I noticed I forgot to open the phone bill, and something told me to. For some reason, this time, they included a list of outgoing calls from my wife's cell phone. 233 calls, in that month alone, to a specific phone number. I called it from my cell. A man answered, wide awake, asking who this was. I told him my first name and asked if he was expecting a young woman, my wife's name, to arrive at his house in a few moments. He said yes, then asked how I knew that. I told him she was my wife, and I was pretending to sleep in bed until she left the house. He was speechless. He said the woman he was seeing wasn't married. Just as he said this, I saw my wife's wedding rings by the kitchen sink. I told him if she brought him the 2 items I saw on the Amazon order, she was my wife, and he was her AP. He said if it was true, he would dump her at the same time as me. He said he was getting too old to be playing games and thought she was a serious, respectable woman. I said if she's guilty of who I think she is, she's not who we thought. My wife arrived there while he was on the phone with me. He just set down the phone. I could hear her greet him like he was her lover. Then I heard her say she had 2 surprises for him. He gasped in a scared way when he saw the items were the same ones I mentioned. He wasted no time and told her he had her husband on the phone right now. He handed her the phone, and I said, "Hey honey, we're over." She squeaked and started crying against her will. She tried to say there was a misunderstanding, but we both waited, with me on speaker, for her to give an explanation, and she didn't know what to say. She tried saying she was planning to divorce me, which is why she started seeing this guy. I asked her if she told her AP about our 2-year-old daughter, and she did not. He said he had no idea she was married with a new child. He apologized to me, then broke up with her and kicked her out. She was screaming and crying, really freaking out. I couldn't understand what was happening, but the call was eventually dropped. Since she had a key, I moved the couch and other furniture in front of the doors to stop her from getting in. She tried to call me 13 times while I slept like a baby next to our 2-year-old. I knew I figured out what was going on, and it gave me so much peace I was able to rest well. The next morning, the police showed up. They told me my wife spent the night in the car, because she couldn't get in even though she lived here. I got the lease, which was in my name. I told them what was going on, and they told her they couldn't force me to let her in, because the place was in my name. She insulted them, asking them what their job was, if not to help people. I was surprised she took it out on them so much. She freaked out about her daughter being inside, and the cops refused to get involved with that as well. She went to her mom's house, 2 hours away. They started figuring out what, if anything, they could do in her defense. Apparently, the evidence I had against her was more than enough to get better favor in the divorce and primary custody of our daughter. My ex had several boyfriends in quick succession, and it just made me extremely thankful that my daughter had a stable home environment with me. She started preschool and is doing great. She still sees her mom. I've started dating someone, but haven't introduced them to my daughter. I'm determined to be her stable father figure without other women coming in and out of our lives. OP, I am so sorry your wife made those terrible decisions. She never should have started communicating on a regular basis with another man without telling you. You could see the behavior changes, and I think you made the best decisions anyone could have made, given the circumstances. You were patient and communicative, although your wife wasn't. She apparently didn't know what she needed to do to avoid temptation and honor her marriage. Never stop honoring the person you chose to live your romantic life with. They change just as you do, but what should never change is open communication and love. Both are a choice. Don't judge or look down upon your spouse, because chances are, you could be judged just the same. Thank you for sharing this story, OP. I hope you are able to heal from this situation. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. I, 25, had a twin brother. He looked exactly the same as me, but he hit the gym a little bit more. My wife, 25, and I got married at the age of 20 because when we met, we knew we were meant to be together. I guess you could say it was as true as we believe love could be. That made us both naive young fools. Since then, my brother developed a passion for working out. I developed my passion for computer technology. My wife and I had lots of hobbies we did together, including painting miniature figurines, building trains and miniature landscapes, and tennis. None of that mattered to her. We went to a family gathering one Thanksgiving. I didn't know it at the time, but she'd already started talking to my brother behind my back. Don't ask me why my brother didn't tell me what was going on. It still hurts me to this day. After we all ate dinner, we mingled around the house while football was on, and I got caught up in a conversation with my uncle about the different players. It was probably 40 minutes before I realized my wife wasn't around. As I looked around, I started noticing my brother's absence, because I thought about finding him to ask if he'd seen my wife. I even looked around outside before I decided to look in the basement of all places. As soon as I opened the door, I could hear someone immediately stop making a sound. I walked down the stairs and heard shuffling before I peeked my head below the ceiling. My wife and twin brother were standing side by side awkwardly, fixing their clothes while they avoided eye contact with me and tried to explain what they were doing. The guest bed right beside them looked like it was freshly made before they got down there. I asked them point blank if they were just having sex. My wife's face turned red, and she very guiltily said no. My twin brother also said no, but then he told me they were. My wife slapped him on the shoulder, saying he was going to cost us our marriage if he said that. He said it was the truth, and I deserved to know. My wife started crying and saying no over and over, not wanting to believe this was happening. She finally asked me if it was really that big of a deal, because he's my twin, so it just proves she loves the same person. My jaw dropped. I couldn't believe she thought this could be justified by the fact that my brother and I were twins. I started yelling at this point and said if anything, it just made her more of a stupid bimbo for deciding to cheat on me. My brother apologized to me and said he was going to attempt to rekindle our relationship sometime in the future after this blew over. I couldn't believe what was happening. I let him leave without saying a word, just staring at my wife. I asked her again why she slept with him if he was my twin. She said that since he worked out, he looked really great, and when he came onto her, he was the one that said it would be like she was sleeping with her husband. My jaw dropped again and I started pacing in the basement. Our whole family was upstairs and they needed to know what just happened. I started marching upstairs and my wife screamed for me to stop and just keep it between us. I laughed loudly and sarcastically. When I got upstairs, it didn't take much to get everyone's attention. They were all staring at me as I explained that I would appreciate all of their support while I go through the next stage in my life, which was going to include divorce and no contact with my twin brother because I just caught the two of them in the basement. Everyone let out their own reactions to the news, but everyone reached out to give me hugs and apologize. People started asking where my brother went and someone said he left already. That was fine. Let him isolate himself from the family to avoid the awkwardness of the situation. Now my wife was still in the basement, far too embarrassed to come out on her own. Some of the women in the family went down to talk to her, hopefully reprimanding her more than anything. She came out with a reddened face and dried tears on her cheeks. She walked straight to her car. I moved in with my uncle and my ex, stayed in the apartment with both our names on the lease for 1 week before she found out she was pregnant. There was no way to know for sure whose baby it was since she was sleeping with me and my brother within the same week. She admitted to me that they had sex 3 times. The third time was when I caught them. She said although they didn't use protection, she doubted the baby could be his. I've decided to be involved with the child, to accept him as mine and co-parent with my ex. She isn't going to file for child support due to the circumstances, and at least the child won't ever have to hear arguing about who their real dad is. My brother just continued his life as normal minus family and is refusing to be involved in his potential child's life. It's devastating that I lost a twin brother from all of this. We essentially don't know each other anymore. If I'm to look at the bright side of things, I'm glad that I started working out and found my new hobby of rock climbing. That's where I met my new girlfriend who is yet to break my trust. We enjoy spending time together, that's for sure, and that's all I could ask for. Please, people, understand that sleeping with your spouse's sibling is not acceptable, and if anything it hurts even more because it was someone they trusted deeply. Wow, OP, you had a very inconsiderate and self-centered wife. She did not consider your feelings at all when she chose to sleep with him. Whether he tried to persuade her or not, she needed to be the honorable woman you thought you could trust. It was her chance to prove how a wife should behave when presented with temptation. She failed miserably. I am relieved that you had family support, OP, and knew better than to try to work it out. After something like this, the relationship is over and you're going to be much happier when you meet someone who's respectable and true to you. Thank you so much for sharing this story with us. I wish you the best of luck with your situation. Now let's get into today's second story. When my wife and I got married, she knew I'd be making less money than her, but it never was an issue. I was and am a freelance animator, and she thought that was a cool career to pursue. After we were married for 7 years, she came into the habit of having to return back to work a few hours after she'd gotten home. She always said it was either paper that needed to be signed before submission, someone royally screwed up, and she needed to fix it, or a coworker was finished with their part now so she could finish what she needed to do before the deadline the next morning. I never questioned what she told me she needed to do for work. I trusted her. We were married for 9 years. I was 36 and she was 38. This returning to work habit started when she was 36, so for 2 years at this point. This time when she left, everything changed. When she left to go back to work, she accidentally took my phone with her. We had really similar phone cases. I heard my wife's text tone go off, which was different from mine, and I knew instantly what happened. I was about to message her by texting my phone when I saw what another person texted her. They were only programmed as initials, but they asked, "Did he let you leave the house yet?" My heart fell down to my feet and my stomach came up to my throat. I hastily replied to this person, saying, "Yep, and could you let her know she accidentally took her husband's phone with her?" This person replied by saying, "Wrong number." I called my own phone from hers, and she answered it, laughing, saying she realized what happened now. I told her she didn't realize everything that happened. She was confused, so I told her the text she just got. She was silent. I could hear heavy breathing while she tried to figure out what to say. She finally suggested it was the wrong number, but she probably knew I was too smart for that. I told her this number was programmed as initials. I asked her who that person was, and she was silent again. I told her she didn't need to come home again. I would have her brothers come get her stuff. She yelled in protest, but I hung up. Her brothers were going to be super disappointed in her. They were like another set of parents, but somehow worse because they were supposed to be her friends too. When I told them what happened, they both agreed to come over. Before my wife showed up, I scrolled through the messages as far as I could stand. This had been going on the entire time she had this going back to work habit. She never went back to work. Every single time, she went to either his house or to a venue with him and then his house. I wanted to lock her out and never see her face again, but she had a key, so I couldn't really keep her out. When she got there, I just told her to start packing. She was crying and begging me to at least let her explain. I told her she didn't need to explain anything. My heart was broken, and I knew it was her fault and what she did to cause it. She went on to say that she felt like two different people. She said she loved me deeply, but also enjoyed seeing AP. She told me she would stop if it meant we could save our marriage. I asked her how long this had been going on, even though I figured it probably had been for 2 years already. She didn't want to answer me. Instead, she just swore it would end if I gave her another chance. I told her it was over. She'd been going behind my back and sleeping with another man for far too long. Too long for me to wrap my head around, and she played me like a fiddle. Just then, her brothers arrive. I left them alone to talk while I packed my wife's clothes for her. I just wanted her out, so I could start adjusting to being single again. When they finally came in to help me, they looked very upset, but not as upset as my wife. It looked like after they knew what was going on, they told her there was no way they could defend her actions, or convince me to give her a second chance. They helped me pack quickly. She barely helped, stopping often to blow her nose and sob. I asked her why she did this, wanting to know if I was undesirable in any way. She said marriage after a while became boring, and when AP showed her attention, she couldn't turn him away. I couldn't help but call her a few names at this point. I said she didn't deserve to be married to anyone, because a steady relationship is a luxury for the loyal spouse. Her brothers agreed. She said she didn't like being the breadwinner either. That got me. She told me at the start of our marriage that it didn't bother her at all, and she only needed me to pay a few bills. Her money would enable us to have some occasional treats and splurging. This arrangement worked extremely well, as far as I could tell, for 9 years. Without the income one provided, she wouldn't have the extra money to splurge, but she didn't see it that way. She felt like her money was providing the fun, and didn't look at what I was taking care of. I told her to get out now, and only her brothers were welcome to come back for her stuff. They almost had to carry my wife out of the house. She was so resistant to leave. I kept telling her I didn't want to see her. I didn't believe I could trust her ever again. Finally, she left with them. I was never told where she was staying, but she did try to apologize a lot over text. I think it was just because AP was moving 8 hours away, and she wasn't welcome to come with him. The affair fog was wearing off, and she was realizing how badly she messed up. I got to keep our house in the divorce, but I ended up renting it back to my ex-wife. It was pretty empowering to be her landlord. She managed to pay any rent really well, but she didn't have any extra spending money as I predicted. It's up to me if I ever want to lower or raise her rent, but for now, I'm just letting it be. I started listening to music on a run every day, and it is very therapeutic. I hope you all never cheat on your partner or go through something like this. It's a really terrible thing, but anyone can survive it out stronger emotionally. Wow, OP, I am so sorry this happened to you. A simple mistake by your wife exposed what she was hiding from you for so long. It isn't easy to go through this level of betrayal. It was no fault of yours, OP. Your wife didn't value the relationship she had with you, and she didn't try to openly communicate and remain honest with you. Marriages require some hard conversations sometimes, even the admission of feelings for another person, but if you truly love your spouse and want to fight this attraction, sometimes confiding in them is necessary so they can work with you to repair the relationship. If they sit down to talk about these things, they may realize that their spouse is already aware they're lacking in that category, and they're willing to focus more energy on improving those things. On the other hand, the straying spouse may realize that these lacking qualities they see aren't really that important on a deeper level. For example, any physical features a spouse is lacking is not worth cheating over. If you've chosen to love your partner already, you've chosen to accept them regardless of what physical features they have. We appreciate you sharing your story with us. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Today I'm going to tell you guys how I, 32, wasn't good enough for my wife, 36. I still don't know why, and it still bothers me today. We were married for 9 years when my wife went from a happy, outgoing, communicative woman to a completely shut down and gloomy individual. She mentioned that she was having trouble finding purpose in life. She really enjoyed fitness and working out, so she did work at a gym as a trainer for a while, but suddenly quit after one of her students insulted her and said she didn't know what was good for them. She didn't want to work for a large corporation and couldn't find any shops to work at. Before I knew it, she stopped taking care of herself. She didn't want to exercise and started overindulging in edible treats she would normally limit herself with. But then, just as quickly as it happened, it started to reverse. My wife didn't tell me anything different other than she was starting to feel better. I thought that was great, and asked her what caused her mind to change. At first, she said she didn't know, but then she said she started to realize that animals live their life, even without knowing their purpose, so she could do the same. That seemed fine to me. Around the same time, she adopted 2 cats. She started exercising again to take off the 10 pounds she gained, and she started doing her hair and makeup each day, even though she wasn't going anywhere that I knew of. I made sure to compliment her and offer her encouragement. I brought home cat toys and treats along with flowers for her. I did everything I could to support her and be her husband. It wasn't enough. One night I brought work papers home to work on, and the next day I forgot to bring them back to the office. So I returned home 3 hours after I went to work. There was an awfully nice car parked in our driveway. My heart started racing instantly. I didn't recognize it, so I knew someone was visiting my wife. I parked behind this mystery car to block them in and ran into the garage. I closed the sliding garage door to slow down anyone trying to escape. I really was thinking about the worst-case scenario. After I entered the house, I made sure the front and back door were locked too. I went downstairs to our gaming basement, as we called it. As I came down the stairs, I saw them scrambling to stop doing what they were doing. One of them was my wife, and the other was a man I saw once before. I saw him at my wife's cousin's funeral a month ago, right before my wife's outlook on life changed for the better. Was this guy blood related to my wife? I didn't know. They were both naked. AP grabbed his clothes and dove behind a stack of boxes to get dressed. My wife wrapped a blanket around her, sat on the couch, and face planted into a pillow to scream. I asked loudly what the hell was happening right now, and my wife just asked me what I was doing back home. I asked if that was really important when I just found her screwing another man, and quickly followed up by asking who the hell he was. She said he was Alan, but we'll just call him AP. They met at the funeral we went to, and they weren't going to have sex. They were just going to make out for some innocent fun. I was so offended and disgusted with her at this moment. Why did she think that was even okay? Why did she want to do this, and did she take me for a fool? It was obvious to me they were having sex when I came down the steps, and I was sure this wasn't the first time he was in her house. I decided to bluff. I told her I installed discreet security cameras outside her house 4 months ago, so I was going to know if this wasn't the first time he was here. I shouted to AP, who was still hiding, and asked him if he'd been to my house before this. He was extremely nervous when he replied, telling me he didn't want any trouble and would prefer to stay out of it. I screamed that he was involved with my wife, so apparently he couldn't stay out of it. I asked him again if he was in my house before, and he said he would tell me whatever I wanted to know if I came with him outside to his car. My wife screamed for him not to tell him anything, which was the first admission that she wasn't telling me the truth. I looked at her with fury in my eyes. I couldn't help it. I'm so glad I didn't completely snap and go crazy or anything. I agreed to AP's terms and went with him outside. He couldn't have been older than 24, so he was at least 12 years younger than my wife. On the way out, I locked my wife in the basement. I had to shut the door really quickly because of how close she was to following us and protesting. I didn't want her to interrupt us at all. When we got outside, AP was very discouraged to see that his car was blocked in. I told him to start spilling the beans. He hesitated, of course. He probably didn't want me to savagely attack him, but he was outside now and could see his car, which gave him renewed hope that I would let him leave. He said they started seeing each other the day after the funeral. Every day I was at work, he came over to see her. He said at first it didn't go beyond just being friends and playing video games, but then my wife started coming on to him. She would ask him how she looked and stuff like that until they finally ended up doing it. I couldn't help it. I started crying. I asked him why. He said he only ever had a sexual relationship once before, so it was hard for him not to give in. He knew she was married and knew who I was, but he was excited she liked him. I said that was enough explanation. I thanked him for telling me the truth like a man. I moved my car so he could leave. Before he left, though, I told him never to speak to this woman again, even if she said we were divorced. I told him she wasn't good for anybody and he could find a better woman than her. He agreed. Just after he left, my wife's sister pulled up like she was responding to a fire. She tried to get out of the car before it was in the park and had to shove it into the park with her leg hanging out. She jumped out and started screaming at me that I locked her sister in the basement. I told her yes, I did because I had to talk to her lover without her screaming at us. She stopped dead in her tracks and asked, "Lover?" To which I replied, yes, she had a lover in her house while I was at work. Since I had time to talk with him alone, he told me they'd been sleeping together for weeks before I found them today. She was speechless. Just then, her phone started ringing. It was my wife. She asked me if we could go get her, and I said yes. We went in, unlocked it, and she barged in looking like a wild animal. When she stopped screaming, she realized her sister was much calmer than she expected. Her sister asked her if she was cheating on me, and my wife just rolled her eyes and asked if we were serious. Her sister told her to stop playing dumb and be honest because it is not okay for her to be cheating on me. My wife was speechless and annoyed. She finally said they didn't have sex. I let her know that AP told me everything before he left. She just stood there, looking like an idiot with her mouth hanging open. I told her I saw him on top of her, doing the motion, and I didn't need her admission. I just wanted a divorce. She did a double take and asked me why like she didn't already know. Her sister went upstairs to start packing her stuff. My wife's face was pale and her makeup was smeared by the time her sister persuaded her to get in her car and stay at her for a while. She could not believe her life was changing and she was caught. I could tell she never really considered the possibility or consequences of me catching her in the act. It's a shame if she put any thought into her actions, she might have realized she wasn't ready to move or divorce me. Why wasn't my support and presence enough in her life? I showered her with love, but she only thrived with the attention of another man. I told her these things when she wouldn't stop calling me. She said she couldn't live without me and she didn't think hanging out with this guy would lead to having sex. I told her I didn't believe a word she said because she had a man over in her house while I was at work. I added that her behavior switched so quickly once she met this guy, so I knew she was sleeping with him and relishing the attention. Her sister caught her having sex with a completely different guy in her own bed. That was obviously insulting and upsetting enough that she kicked out my wife. By this time, our divorce was final and I got to keep my house. 9 years ago, I had my wife sign a prenup in my favor and since I was paying for the house and she didn't think we were going to get divorced, she signed it. I don't know where my ex is now. I haven't heard anything about her and I'm extremely glad we never had children. I've since started dating a new woman and we've been together for 1 year. I'm taking it slow and only have my girlfriend sleep over for short lengths of time. To be ready for a new marriage means you're perfectly capable of standing on your own 2 feet and don't depend on another person to function. I know that sounds odd because it's joined together in marriage, but that's the best way to ensure your marriage will be successful. Wow, OP. I am so sorry your wife didn't appreciate your attempts to connect and emotionally bond with her. From hearing your story, I assumed that your wife got it in her head that she deserved more than just one man to shower her with adoration. It seems to me that she started having some kind of mental crisis about herself and the only thing that helped was an outsider's flattery opinion about her. The problem that causes this is when a partner starts to see their spouse as less meaningful to them than other people. It might be because they start to focus on their spouse's faults, they become bored with routine, and marriage has provided them the comfort required to wonder if they deserve better. Of course, this is nothing more than a person's ego inflating. They too have faults. Faults that their partner accepts and works around. No one is more worthy than another for love and attention. We all deserve an equal chance to find unconditional love, which means having a spouse that doesn't decide to betray you for anything. Stay humble and stay committed, everyone. Thank you for sharing your story, OP. Now let's get into today's second story. The marriage to my wife, 30, was all fun and games until I, 31, needed her to compromise with me. When we got married at 24 and 25 years old, I was extremely well off already. I'd been working at my father's company since I was 18 and had several raises over that time and savings built up. My wife was able to get her nails and hair done whenever she wanted. I bought her a nice car and made sure it was always safe and legal. She didn't have anything to worry about and she got everything she wanted. She was a good wife to me and never acted suspiciously or unhappy. The only thing I expected of her was to be there and have dinner ready when I got home from work. It all changed when my dad began struggling to pay medical bills for my mom. I told him I was more than willing to help, but it meant I had to tell my wife to cut back on her spending. I asked her to spend less than $200 a month on pointless things. Of course, I didn't say it was pointless spending. I called it fun money. She was appalled. She didn't know how to spend as little as $200. I told her this sacrifice was for my mom, but that didn't seem to justify it for her. 1 month later, while I was doing her expenses, I calculated that she spent $821 over what we could afford. When I confronted her about it, she blew up on me. She said she couldn't possibly stop buying the things she needed to survive. When I asked her what she was talking about, she named a haircut, nail fillings, a new purse, Bath and Body Works, new clothes, and new shoes. I could tell she really believed she needed these things. I was starting to realize I married a heartless, materialistic woman. I told her this couldn't happen again. My dad and mom needed our financial help for a while, and it wasn't asking very much of her. She still didn't like it, but she said she would try harder. The next month, while I reviewed our purchases, I found she got gas in a town 2 hours away. This shocked me. I had no idea she even left town. I decided it was much better not to bring it up with her. Instead, I got a GPS tracker and put it on her car. I was going to accumulate proof that she was using my money to see someone behind my back. Surprisingly, that month her spending decreased from $821 over to only $305 over. Still bad, but she tried. I told her she was doing better, but I needed her to cut back even more. She wasn't as upset as she was the first time, which actually raised a red flag for me. Was she spending someone else's money? 1 month later, I had a record of all the trips my wife made while I was at work. There was a lot of shopping in a town that was 2.5 hours away. It didn't make sense because her spending was way down, only $168 total. What was happening? That's when I discovered she made trips to a specific neighborhood address 2.5 hours away. She visited this address and places near it on 10 days out of the month. On 5 other days, she went shopping in our area but didn't spend any money. How was that possible? I knew at this point she had to be seeing someone else. Someone that provided her money. My wife was pretty simple-minded and her password for everything was the same for years. I finally caved in and got into her phone while she slept. I found a secret messaging app which involved text conversation with someone programmed as lover. How disturbing. My heart was pounding as I read their conversation, which started 2.5 months ago, around the same exact time I told her she needed to cut back on her spending. She complained to this person that she was being cheated on but didn't want to go through a divorce until she got revenge. So she lied to this man and he gladly volunteered to sleep with her. He was a lonely older man who had money to spare because he was a lawyer. She found her perfect target. They sent each other pictures of very private areas and she thanked him for treating her to things. In response to that, he thanked her for the sex. I can't tell you how mad I was. I never felt this level of betrayal. I woke her up and demanded she leave the house. She was shocked and offended, but all I had to do was throw her phone outside and she followed it. I locked all the doors and threw her car keys out the window. I shouted that she was lucky I even let her take the car because I bought it. She was crying and making excuses. I told her I saw everything she said to her lover, noticed the change in her spending habits, and had her GPS location throughout the month. She had the nerve to be upset with me. She screamed outside my house for an hour before she finally got in her car and drove away. The GPS showed she went to AP's house. I filed for divorce, and before it was even finalized, AP told her he didn't want her to live with him. He wasn't ready for a serious relationship. He just wanted to have some fun. I knew this because my wife confided in our pastor when she was homeless and begging the church for money. He was confused because as far as he knew, we were still married. While begging for money, she asked him to pray for her. I think she needs more than prayer. Word got around in our church and a single lady approached me and asked me on a date. Shortly after that, the divorce was final and my wife only got to keep her car. Everything else was mine due to the proof I had against her. My mom managed to recover from her health issues and my income went back to normal in less than a year. That was the best part out of all of this. I made sure to tell my ex that she left me because she was materialistic and impatient. I hope my story encourages everyone to be hopeful in the face of betrayal. Life goes on even if it doesn't involve that person anymore. Also, don't fall for any materialistic girls because they have a lot of growing up to do. OP, I am so sorry your wife didn't have the patience or consideration for you or your mom to cut back on her spending. There are people who have no choice but to live off of $1,000 in a month, yet there she was, complaining she had to give up her fake nails for a short time. It's hard to know if someone is choosing to be with you because of something other than who you are. I wish your wife would have put some thought and empathy into her actions. She didn't think of anyone but herself when she chose to find someone else's money to spend. Being materialistic is a shame and it only makes someone crave more and more. Find the true meaning and purpose in life instead of burying yourself in crap and wasting your time and money. I'm glad you came out on top in the divorce and she wasn't able to destroy you any more than she already did. I'm also relieved that your mom is doing better now. Thank you for sharing your story. I wish you the best of luck in life. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. The very next day was my wife's surprise birthday party. I was excited because I actually succeeded at planning a surprise party for her. She said she never had one because she always accidentally discovered the plans for it. I guess the last time her parents tried to throw her one was when she was 16. She was turning 27 now and I was 25. I stayed at home with our 4-year-old son while she went to work. I was out running errands for birthday party supplies when I drove through her work parking lot to find her car. My plan was to leave a rose and romantic note on it, giving her instructions to meet me at a specific address at a specific time tomorrow. Of course, she was going to come home to me after work and ask me about the note, but it was the spontaneous surprise I aimed for. I circled the parking lot quite a bit before I caught a glimpse of her car in the very corner of the parking lot on the back side of the building. I got close enough to it to see movement inside. That was very weird, so I parked my car as close as I could to hers and zoomed in on my phone's camera. I started recording the movement in the car and caught multiple glimpses of her, topless, with another man. I couldn't believe she was doing this. They were having sex in the company parking lot. I looked around for any security cameras and noticed they were all just out of range from my wife's car. She parked there intentionally. How many times had she done this? I felt like I was going insane, but her son was with me in the back seat of my car. I had to play it cool, stay strong, and go home to come up with a plan. At home, I typed out a text to the surprise party guest list. This guest list included all of our friends and family. Surprisingly, none of my wife's coworkers. She probably intended to keep family life separate from work life for a reason. The text explained that I discovered only today, the day before the party, that my wife was having an affair. The party would go on, but instead of yelling surprise, we would yell something else. Instead of the other activities I had planned, we would do something else. Everyone was very sympathetic to me and agreed to do as I said. Even my wife's mom called me to apologize on her daughter's behalf and say I didn't deserve this betrayal and pain. I broke down crying on the phone with her. When my wife arrived home, I pretended everything was fine. It was really hard to do, but I knew tomorrow was going to be everything I needed it to be. The next morning, I spoke to my lawyer and picked up divorce papers. Then I arranged with the venue to be able to use their video projector. I went back to my wife's work and put the note on her car without the rose. She didn't deserve a rose. Then I got back home and waited. As anxious and sad as I was, I knew the end of my marriage was not the end of the world. Especially if she was the cheating whore she proved herself to be. My wife confirmed she got the note by texting me. I took our son to my mom's house and gave him a hug. The worst thing about divorce was the impact it would have on him. When I arrived at the venue, guests were arriving and apologizing to me. They'd assured me they would do anything to help support me through this heartbreak. We got everything set up so it would be one hell of a show when my wife walked in. The lights went out and we held our breath. As soon as she walked in, the lights came on and everyone jumped out yelling, "Hey cheater." I allowed a few moments of awkward silence while my wife's brain processed that everyone just called her a cheater. She looked offended, scared, and confused. Then I pushed play on the projector. It showed the video of her car rocking back and forth with glimpses of herself. Her jaw dropped and she covered her mouth with her hands. She looked around the room, noticing all her friends and family staring at her in disapproval. The guests decided to leave now and I thought it was a good time too. I left my wife there. I got home 40 minutes before her. I stole her house key earlier that morning so she wouldn't be able to get in. All of her stuff was on the front porch. She arrived home only to be shocked all over again. She broke down crying again. I spoke to her from the second-story window, telling her she had to get her stuff and leave because she wasn't my wife anymore. She just flipped me off while she cried and called someone. 10 minutes later, it looked like the man she cheated with was helping her take her stuff somewhere, to his house maybe. I knew who my wife's boss was so I emailed him the video I caught. The next morning, I got a reply. He was able to use security cameras to identify who walked to and from the car with my wife, and they would both be fired immediately. Of course, it didn't take long before my wife called me. She cussed me out and called me names, but that didn't bother me. I knew she was going to realize just how badly she messed up. All through the time of the divorce and afterward, she begged and pleaded with me to stop changing our lives. Eventually, I stopped responding to her because she knew she did this to us. I haven't heard from her in a while. My main focus will always be my son. I have hope that I'll find a good woman for me and a good mother figure for him. Wow, OP, that is a terrible thing to go through. You went to your wife's job to surprise her, only to find a very disturbing secret. She was not considering anyone or anything but herself when she chose to cheat on you. Being human, we face temptation nearly every day. The wisest of all of us can resist that temptation every time and stay focused on the people that matter most. It isn't very hard to think about the consequences of your actions before making a decision and never assume that a secret will stay a secret. I have hope that you'll find a woman capable of honest communication and selflessness, OP. You made very wise decisions and used self-control in a situation where most people would freak out. I wish you the best of luck in life going forward. Now let's get into today's second story. My wife didn't usually go out to lunch with friends. I would have supported it, but she was a little socially awkward, so most of her friends were online. She had one best friend that we both knew well, named Leah. She'd see her as often as possible, but she lived 45 minutes away. We had an open phone and computer policy between us, but my wife was such a sweet little angel, I never felt the need to check either. She was on it a lot, but usually still interactive with me and made it clear that giving me her attention and time was a priority. That started to change when she stayed in the bathroom longer, sometimes even locking the door, and seemed irritated if I asked her anything while she was absorbed in one of her electronic devices. Well, I became officially suspicious when she asked me if she could go out to lunch with a new female friend. She even went so far as to show me the between them, but only a few about meeting up. Sure, her name was programmed as a girl's name, but how did I know who it really was? How did my wife even know who it really was? I asked her to call this girl so I could say hi, but she said she couldn't right then because she was at work. She assured me they talked on the phone lots of times when I was at work. That was a little more unnerving than comforting. When the day came for her to meet this girl for lunch, my wife became even more insistent that she was going and I needed to trust her. After she left in her little old car, I got into mine and followed her using our family location app, but she turned it off after 13 minutes of driving. So she didn't want me to know where she was. That was disheartening. I drove up and down the street where she turned it off. It was full of restaurants and shopping. After looking for 8 minutes, I was about to give up because I felt like she could be spying on me at this point and I'd have no idea. But then I saw her car in the Applebee's parking lot. So I parked at a distance and wore my prop hat, sunglasses, and scarf into the restaurant. Before the hostess even greeted me, I saw them. My wife and Leah's live-in boyfriend. So that's why she didn't just lie and say she was meeting Leah. I couldn't believe it. She was seeing another man behind my back and it was her best friend's boyfriend. Why the hell did she feel the need to do this? My heart was pounding and I'm sure my face was red. When the hostess tried to seat me, I told her I wouldn't be staying after all. I snuck over to where I could get a good picture of them, then went back to my car. I waited, determined and eager to catch them in whatever they were doing. My wife got into Leah's boyfriend's car and I followed them at a distance to Leah's house. Her car wasn't in the driveway and my nauseating suspicions only grew. They went into the house and I sat in the car wondering what I should do. My wife didn't make very much money, but her parents would send her pretty nice sums of money each month for various reasons. I decided if I caught her cheating on me, I would tell her parents. They had very high expectations for their daughter, which didn't involve her cheating or getting divorced. Then I decided to go inside. The front door was locked, but it wasn't hard to find a spare key. Unlocking it was louder than I wanted it to be, and I heard a few movements as the door opened. I entered and closed it behind me, hoping they thought it was Leah returning home unexpectedly. The last noise I heard sounded like it came from the kitchen, so I slowly walked there, keeping my eyes peeled. When I got there, no one was there, but there was a door leading to the basement. I didn't open it, I just locked it. If they were in there, they'd be found eventually. I searched the rest of the house and didn't find them, so they were definitely stuck in the basement. I left the house, locking it and returning the key before driving home. Before I even got home, Leah called me. She said she just found my wife and her boyfriend in the basement together. I played dumb, she was in disbelief, and I could hear them all arguing and trying to explain things. I apologized to Leah, told her I was driving, and asked her to call me back when she figured out what was going on. She called me back 1 hour later. She was crying as she explained that she took her boyfriend's phone from him and checked messages. There were messages spanning back 5 months between my wife and him, and it was clear that their relationship was much more than friends. They had sex as early as 4 months ago, because that was the first time it was mentioned in texts. They spoke about when Leah or I would go to work, and how lonely they were. They complained they needed more attention and could handle more than one partner. I was furious. I apologized to Leah again for her having to go through this with me. I asked her to send me screenshots of what she had, because these cheaters needed to be called out. Once I got them, I sent them to my wife's parents. I also posted them on Facebook, tagging my wife. Leah did the same, tagging her boyfriend. Social media exploded with hate comments towards them both. They were shunned. My wife called me 3 hours later because she still hadn't come home. I imagine because she had a feeling I knew what she was doing. She had a sad tone as she said sorry to me, asking what she could do to make this better. I told her there was nothing she could do. I already told her parents and planned on filing for divorce. She wailed and started crying when I told her that. Just then, her mother called her on the other line. She hung up on me to answer it. When she called me back, she was crying so hard I could barely understand her. It felt good to hear her suffering similar emotional torment to what she caused me. She tried to me that she didn't have anyone now, and I asked her how that was my problem. Then she tried several different tactics to get me to take her back or show her a flicker of mercy, even going so far as to offer me a pass to have sex with another woman. I declined and told her I'd be able to have sex with anyone I wanted now, because I was single. She tried to contact me every day throughout the divorce, but I ghosted her. I had proof that she cheated, so I kept my house and didn't have to pay her a dime in alimony. To wrap up my story, Leah and I have both become good friends after going through this, and I wanted to share this story in hopes of helping other people to cope with sudden change and unfaithfulness. Wow, Opie, I'm so sorry your wife went behind your back like that and with her best friend's boyfriend of all people. I believe you made very smart and sly decisions to find the truth and expose their secret. I'm also glad you were able to get evidence of what was happening to help your case in the divorce. I know you're going to be able to keep moving forward and have a good, satisfactory life. In all relationships, trust and communication are fundamentally important. Add selflessness and consideration for others to ensure a wonderful relationship. Thank you for sharing your story with our viewers. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.